When it comes to video games, action games in particular, I've always preferred third-person perspective over first-person. There's something about the wider field of view, getting to actually see your character in action, and having more dynamic cutscene options. It just feels better to me most of the time. I'll still give first-person games a good chance now and again, and some I have really enjoyed. But also, when I think back to a lot of popular, well-liked, and heavily praised games that I've tried, but couldn't fully get into and thus quit just a couple hours in, they tend to have one thing in common: first-person POV. BioShock, Fallout New Vegas, Dishonored. With these games, there was something more about the gameplay style that I personally just couldn't get into at the time, but it also probably didn't help, on the side, that oddly enough, I tend to feel more disconnected from stories when they're told from a first-person perspective. You'd think it'd be the opposite when you're literally in the character's shoes yourself. I should be extra invested in the story. That's me looking through my own eyes. But it just doesn't usually work that way for me. Now, with the recent release of Resident Evil Requiem, we got a brand new choice for the Resident Evil series. You could either play in third person, like the majority of the games in the series, or you could play in first person, just like the last two mainline titles, Resident Evil 7 and 8. A couple of cutscenes in the game are in first person perspective, but the vast majority of scenes in Requiem are in third person, even if you play in first. Even sometimes mid-combat, when you get grabbed, I think if you're in first person, it pulls you out of the character's head so you can see better what's going on. So it's not a game that's strictly first or third, but even if you play in first, you will get a lot of third-person perspective. And I bring this up because I've seen a few posts of people just casually asking whether players felt they could better connect with our last Resident Evil protagonist, Ethan Winters, who was a character they dedicated so strongly to the first-person perspective that they never even show his face. Or if players preferred the new protagonist, Grace, who you'll visually see a lot of during the game, even if you play in first-person. And a lot of the answers focus more on personality. For a lot of people, it might be easier to relate to Grace, who is a very anxious character, compared to Ethan, who, despite being a normal guy, your average Joe, he handles what gets thrown at him surprisingly well. But I do also wonder if one aspect of why Grace's story is easier to connect to is simply because it's easier to empathize with a character when you see their face and their body as they're speaking and struggling and connecting to other characters. It's not just a voice that you hear as you sit in front of your screen, although that's not to say voice acting alone can't be very powerful. And this is nothing against Ethan. I think he's a great character who would go through hell and back 1,000 times for his family. And especially in the Shadows of Rose DLC for Resident Evil Village, wow, you really feel connected to him through his interactions with his daughter. And, well, maybe it helps that that DLC is from a third-person perspective. So we actually see Rose going through it emotionally as she gets to talk to her dead dad. That's something to consider. But enough about Ethan. This isn't a video about Resident Evil. The point here is that as someone who tends to love games with deep stories the most, things I can really get invested in, I admittedly usually brush off first-person games because they don't grip me as easily. For example, one of the most recent games I played in first person was Far Cry 5, and, well, that was fun gameplay-wise, and I really enjoyed the world building and the villains. I didn't really connect to the heroes as much, as memorable as some of them were. And maybe also the problem with Far Cry 5 in particular is that it is a silent protagonist, but silent protagonists can exist in third-person games, so that's a different topic that we won't get into. But again, the point is, if you gave me a choice between two games that were very similar, one in first person and one in third, I'd assume that I would enjoy the third-person perspective one more, and assume that I would fall deeper into the grip of the story and characters, even if they were told in similar ways. It's just that POV works better for me. But, like I said, I never write off first-person games completely. Like recently, on a whim, I decided to try Cyberpunk 2077. Just the other day, after dozens of hours of gameplay, completing just about every quest in the game, I think Cyberpunk 2077 changed my mind. Or at least changed my perspective on just how gripping a first-person game can be. While playing Cyberpunk, I never truly felt like I myself was the protagonist, V, but that didn't stop me from feeling incredibly invested in the story and the characters that V interacted with, and V herself. I grew attached to them, I felt their pain, I felt like they had really full lives and complex emotions that we were really only scratching the surface of. Just like in real life, you know there's so much more to this person beneath the surface than what you're getting at first glance. I love when characters are written and acted in that way, and they don't just fall into a caricature or an archetype, where what you see is what you get and not much else. I like when you don't have to flesh them out fully by filling in the blanks and making up the details in your mind. In Cyberpunk, you feel like maybe through the right dialogue choice or action, you'll get one step closer to knowing this character fully. And I admit, I feel like this wouldn't work as well if Cyberpunk was in third person. Not at all. These characters really feel close to you, looking you in the eye, connecting to the camera in the way that they wouldn't in a third-person scene with switching camera angles. It really draws you into every word, and I really appreciated that. And I haven't fully felt this way in any other first-person perspective game that I've played before. And I just think it's cool to play something that changes your mind about a genre that you've struggled with before. Like, seriously, don't be afraid to try something that doesn't fit every single little box that you're looking for. It might be one of the best things you've ever played. I felt so invested in the world of Cyberpunk and those living in it. And like I said, I feel like I barely even scratched the surface. Like, there's so many other angles I can approach things from in subsequent playthroughs, so many files I never got around to reading, stuff like that. It's just a very rich and full world, and I look forward to spending even more dozens of hours in it, uncovering more. Now, I briefly mentioned choices, and I've certainly played other RPGs where choices matter, things like Mass Effect, and while those games had their share of satisfyingly tough enough choices that make you pause and consider what option is best or which option you best believe in, so many choices in Cyberpunk, especially at the end, amplified that feeling 10 times over for me. There are moments where I still question if I made the quote-unquote right choice, just as characters outside of V sometimes question if they maybe went too far or maybe didn't go far enough. But there is no right choice, no perfect ending to hope to achieve. You just have to live out your dying days trying to do the best you can. They say there are no happy endings in Night City, and it's true that a lot of Cyberpunk is just one horrible thing happening after another. But it's not misery porn that's just trying to be miserable and nothing else. It's a story of people trying to get by in a world nearly completely run by corrupt corporations, and how even in some of their darkest moments, they'll still cling to hope or to their ideals rather than let themselves become yet another selfish asshole taking advantage of others to make it to the top. But I also love that none of the characters feel perfect, like the most precious, perfect, ideal hero who can do no wrong. No, in their passion, despite good intentions, they too can make bad choices. Maybe you try to stop them, maybe you encourage them. You yourself can either listen to others or rebel against them. You can save people or let them die. Sometimes when you try to save them, you'll fail, and those moments can weigh heavy on you. But all you can do is keep going, because your time is running out, and you have yourself to save as well. And that too could either end in success or failure, depending on what choices you make. Like I said, there are so many deep characters and heavy moments. Evelyn's story and Judy with her personal connection to it especially hit me hard. Like, wow, Evelyn, like many other characters, really goes through some of the worst things you could imagine. Horrific, rape and abuse and suicide, and Judy only knew the full extent of it because she watched the brain dances that had been recorded of those events and had to essentially experience them herself, to not only lose her best friend, but to also feel all the pain she went through too. That is so tragic. But the story is so well written because it doesn't dwell on those things for any gratuitous suffering and make the point overdone. It doesn't have to. It knows it's going to sit in the back of your mind for hours as you keep playing the game, because when it's that close to you and spoken so intimately to your face, it hits hard. So I played as a female V and chose to romance Judy because, this or this, what are you going to choose? But no, seriously, I felt really attached to Judy from the story. You're with her through those really horrible experiences, and she in turn supports you, and you get to open up to each other in some really nice scenes. She has been endlessly done wrong in life, but she still sees beauty in it, and beauty in humanity. She still makes jokes, still cares fiercely about people, but she's also allowed to cry and feel doubt, and sometimes want to run away. And that's so perfectly human. And I feel like I connected with that more because the character was looking straight into my eyes more than I would have otherwise. Now, to keep rambling about Judy for a moment, the first ending I got was the Sun ending, where part of that involves, if you romanced her, Judy breaking up with you because she needs to go her separate way in life. And maybe that should feel like a really bad part of the ending. After all we've been through together, it's just over like that? But I actually thought it was satisfying. We always should have known it was doomed. Judy never wanted to stay in Night City, and it'd never be right to ask her to stay. And we always thought V was likely headed towards death. Maybe it's best, after Judy's relationships have always ended in suffering in some way or another, that she won't have to stick around to watch V pass away too. Even before this, just during Judy's final romance mission, I felt that it was never meant to be some perfect romance that ended in a perfect happily ever after. It was just two people finding one pocket of good in a horrible, horrible world, letting themselves have a little peace and joy in each other before it would inevitably end. It's bittersweet, but satisfying. And Judy's definitely not the only character that hit me hard. Honestly, it's hard to think of missions where I wasn't walking away with some sense of, wow, that person has given me a lot to think about. Do I agree with them or not? Did I do them right or not? I don't know. Like I said, there are moments in the game where I'm still not sure if I made the right choice. And I may not have felt so deeply entwined with the character that I felt I myself was V, but I really did empathize with V's struggles and hard choices. And personally, I think that's impressive for a first-person game. Because like I said, I think it's generally easier, at least for me, to empathize with a video game protagonist when I see them. But 99% of the time in Cyberpunk, all you've got to go on with V is her voice and the fact that you're making decisions for her. But despite that, it still pulled me in so tightly. When I think of other games that hit me hard that I played in the past year, things like Alan Wake 2 or Quantum Break, I think some of the emotional moments in those games wouldn't have worked in first person. So the fact that Cyberpunk 2077 pulls it off so well probably even made me way more emotional than those other games I mentioned did. The fact that it finally fully proved my tiny little prejudice wrong, that a first-person game can't suck me in entirely and make me feel everything. Because, oddly enough, like I said, that POV always made me feel disconnected when it should have been the opposite. The fact that it made me forget everything that ever annoyed me in the past about first-person games. It's just great. I love it. I really do. There's something about Cyberpunk that spoke to me. Between the mix of pain and hope and moral dilemmas and questions of what's wrong and right in a world of cybernetics and highly advanced AI and everything else that's going on, being face to face with everything was the right way to do it. I wouldn't want it any other way. I'm glad Cyberpunk 2077 is in first person, and that's probably the first time I've ever thought that about an action game. Cyberpunk is already on my hypothetical top games I've played of all time list. It was such a special experience for me, and I can't wait to play it again. Although I also dread playing it again because I know those hard-hitting moments are going to hit me just as hard, if not harder, the second time around. But anyway, I guess the point of the video is try new things. Follow that whim, even if you think, oh, maybe I'd like it more if this little aspect of the gameplay or the genre was different. Okay, well, what if you actually fall in love with that thing instead and end up really grateful for it? I still prefer third-person games. I have no plans to start seeking out a bunch of first-person games now, but I'm no longer as convinced that a story won't hit as hard based on perspective alone. Like I said, Cyberpunk 2077 changed my mind. And I think that's great. I could talk way more about other characters and other story moments beyond Judy's storyline, but maybe another time when I can actually get into it more after I've played the game like at least 2 more times. So, thank you for being awesome, Cyberpunk 2077. Thank you for making it, CD Projekt Red. And thank you for changing my mind. And to my viewers, thank you for watching. Stay groovy.